This is Peter Sykes, and I'm talking to Gladys Dredge. I'm talking to Gladys Dredge, who has listened to most editions of the Enfield microphone since it started all those years ago. Could you give us some idea, Gladys, as to who was involved in the men's branch of TOC H in Enfield in those early days?
Well, I know that Maurice Strivens was one of the instigators of the beginnings of the Enfield microphone, and there was another German gentleman who was also a member, but I can't remember his name. Probably come to me at the end of the little interview. There was Len Francis and a chap called Barney, Mr. Barnum, Dick Harris, Ken Simons, I think, was another member. Harry Coots.
It certainly sounded as if most of the members of men's branch were involved by the sounds of it.
The men, yes, it was a large branch. There were about, in those days, 20 members. Unfortunately, there are only about 4 left now, and not many of them were involved with the Enfield microphone in the early days, except for Harry Coots.
I believe it was brought about because there were some members of men's branch who were blind, and they decided to read the local newspaper onto tape for them.
Yes, Morris and Gerald was his first name, the German chappie. They asked if my husband John and Charlie Appleby and Gus Hester would appreciate having the news from the Enfield Gazette and Observer read each week to them. And they just, when the men said yes, they would like it very much and would appreciate it, they made inquiries with Howard's to see if they could procure some old not old, but in those days, reel-to-reel tape recorders. And we had 2 Simon cymbals which were brought into force.
So local traders were involved even in those days?
Oh yes,
Howard's
were very good for, they gave them, or didn't give them, but they sold them at cost price, and then they what's the word, Peter? Serviced them for them regularly, and kept them up to date.
How frequent was the tape in those days?
It was weekly.
It was weekly?
It was weekly in the early days, yes.
And how long did it last for, roughly?
I don't really know. It was longer than, I think it was longer than we have it now, really. It was a good half hour to 3/4 of an hour on the cassettes. The cassettes, if I remember rightly, were encased in plastic cases.
I believe they were.
Couldn't be touched, and they were very useful for blind people because all they had to do was, at the end of the tape, just turn the cassette over.
It was a very large version of the modern day cassettes.
That's right.
Yes.
Yes.
How did they actually go and record them? I believe they actually went to their own homes to do it. They took turns.
It varied. Yes, the men used to go. The members who were reading used to go to each other's houses and read. I think they made quite an evening of it. Thoroughly enjoyed it.
Much like we do these days.
Well, yes, except that you have a big studio hall now, don't you?
Well, it's not exactly a hall.
They didn't meet in the one place.
Room.
They met in various places.
Right. But I believe they then, after a while, went to your shop. You had a shop with John in Percival Road.
Yes, they didn't actually record the news tape regularly from our shop. They did occasionally, and then on one never-to-be-forgotten occasion, 2 men didn't turn up, and we pressed into service our son Christopher to do a first reading. And he was 11 at the time. We thought he wasn't too keen, but he did do the reading, and I remember that.
Yeah. First night nerves.
Very like mine now. But it's 30 years ago, 30 long years, and it is, as far as we understand, the earliest or the oldest news tape. We can't prove it, but we know it is. And it's half a lifetime ago, and everybody's asking me what I remember of it, and memories get a bit vague after 30 years.
Oh, that's true.
But people are involved with it. Pat was involved almost at the beginning. She was involved at the beginning with discussing the things, not always with the reading, but she soon after it began, and when it began to go out to other members, because as other blind people heard about it, they asked if they could be included, and gradually it got bigger and bigger. And the ladies' branch were involved then, 2 members in particular, Dorothy Freeman and Ethel Constable, and they used to take the cassettes round to different blind people's houses. They were usually loaned for about half a week. It was taken perhaps on a Monday and returned, picked up again on the Wednesday, taken out to somebody else. It was usually 2 people a week got each machine, because we only had 2 at first.
Certainly in those days when there were limited numbers of listeners, it was much easier to provide the personal service. And unfortunately our success in providing over 250 cassettes these days means that we have to supply it by the post office. But we seem to be the same as other talking newspapers, and I know that now that you've moved up to Nottingham, you receive other newspapers that are local to your area.
That's right.
I won't ask you how ours compares with theirs, because obviously they have a different market.
I can tell you it compares very well with one in particular, and the other one is far above both of them, the Newark and the Nottingham. Enfield and the Nottingham newspaper are very good. They're rather different. The Enfield newspaper gives you Enfield news, that's a weekly paper. The Nottingham Talking newspaper gives me news from the Nottingham Post, and that is weekly, but it's a week's newspapers, so they've got plenty of news. They've got more news to call on. The Newark Talking newspaper, they give you quite a, you get an hour and a half. I'm not, putting them above Enfield, but they give you an hour and a half news. But would you believe, we heard on the tape last week that they have a balance in the bank of £30,000 because of the people that give money, people in Newark, the businessmen who give money to their talking newspaper. And they have 5 sets of people that come 5 weekly rotors, yes, that's the word. And there's about 8 or 9 people in each rota, in each set. They've got a colossal coverage. So, no way could Enfield Microphone compare with them. Well, not from that point of view, but from the point of view of friendliness and knowing the newsreaders. They're just like friends coming into your house each week. And I would miss my Enfield newspaper if I didn't have it.
I think on that note we'd better draw this interview to a close.
Well, I would like to say thank you to all the readers and everyone that takes part in compiling the newspaper each week. And I'm sure everybody who listens to it will join me in that. Congratulations to everyone.